Up in the high, wild hills of Reynolds and Iron counties, trickles of water arise and begin coursing a narrow way to a junction. Fed by 1,000 springs, these trickles become creeks, and they join to form the river that's called Black. It isn't, really. For most of its length, it is a clear, sparkling stream. Once formed, the Black River flows in a generally southerly direction for some 300 miles, with Current River finally forming a tributary to join the White River near Newport, Arkansas. And the two mingle their waters as they head for a junction with the Father of Waters in a swampy, duck-haunted region. But in Missouri, the Black rushes through some of the roughest terrain of the Ozark Plateau, suddenly bursts from the hills into flatlands, and meanders slowly through a part of Butler County before crossing the state line that no river ever recognizes as having meaning. It is a river of contrasts. If a fisherman, idly whipping a fly on the crystalline upper reaches, were magically and suddenly transported into the lower area, he could not believe it was the same stream. The transformation is great and comes in comparatively few miles. From Poplar Bluff southward, the Black becomes almost typical of the Deep South. Giant sycamores, oaks, and gums interlace themselves over the waters. Cypress knees protrude from the marshy banks. Everywhere, green clusters of the parasitic mistletoe hang in trees. The water itself changes, becoming murky, in contrast with the hill springs of its Wayne, Iron, and Reynolds County sources. Our transported angler might not be too surprised to see a giant alligator gar sunning itself in some quiet eddy, and he would likely run across broods of squealers or wood ducks near their nest in a hollow of a giant tree. But all the way, the Black has beauty. Even the insidious gravel bars, all too common on the upper end, have a certain grace. Deep bluff holes are still plentiful, although they are being shallowed by the encroaching gravel. Smallmouth bass abound in the higher reaches, with Kentucky and largemouth bass, and occasionally jack salmon peopling the lower river. The stream sometimes offers excellent fishing, even now. It must have been a paradise for anglers before the watershed was cut and burned off, before subsequent erosion on the surrounding hills filled in the deep holes and choked the swift-running waters between those holes. The old-timers tell with nostalgia of happier days on the river, before the sawmills and tie rafts took their toll. One veteran of the Black recalls a float from Riverside in Reynolds County to Boom Ford in Wayne, some 10 or 12 miles by water, when he took 52 smallmouths with an aggregate weight of something over 100 pounds. This was before the common use of the patent minnow, as artificial lures are called locally. Tackle then was a cane pole, a short length of string, and a bucktail fly with a spinner attached. Other old-timers speak of then infrequent floats conning downriver with strings of bass, goggle-eye, and jacks as long as a well rope trailing behind the boats. All the smaller tributaries, too, were teeming with bass. After the introduction of artificial lures, the one in most popular use was the 15-hook variety, usually rainbow-hued in color, and taking of 2 or 3 bass in a single cast was not unusual. Game abounded along the river then, even making allowance for the optimism of memory. Almost everyone took game for family consumption those days, but the stores, particularly in the larger towns, offered for sale saddles and hams of venison, wild turkey, and smaller game in abundance. From the watershed, thousands of pelts of mink, raccoon, and other fur bearers were shipped to the great fur houses of St. Louis. But man, ever driving for development and expansion, destroys these things. One of the prime factors in the development of the watershed also sounded its death knell. In the 1860s and 70s, the Iron Mountain and Southern Railroad, now part of the Missouri Pacific, pushed across the western part of Wayne County, from north to south, and into Butler County, along a considerable length of Black River. The dense forest of pine and oak, almost untouched over the entire area because of the lack of shipping facilities, now became the center of a swarm of humanity temporarily. Because of the railroad's influence, the timber industry grew at a terrific pace in the period from 1890 to 1910. Great log drives were organized on the upper river, particularly in Reynolds County, and rafts of logs several miles in length were floated, pushed, and sweated down to shipping points along the railroad. Most of these drives, originating in Reynolds County, ended at a point near the town of Leeper in Wayne County, where the railroad picked up timber for distant markets. After all these years, much physical evidence of the big log runs still remains. At picturesque Log Slide Bluff, an immense face of stone and earth towering several hundred feet above the clear water, great scars in the bluff face mark the spots where tons of logs cascaded down into the river, with a rumble and roar that even now one can almost hear in retrospect. But large as are the scars caused by sliding trunks, even more mighty are the less evident scars, which are a direct result of all this exploration in the timberland. For these latter wounds still fester in the land. Instead of the towering trunks and the leaf-framed vistas through the trees, a dense growth of brush now covers the region, replacing the timber monarchs that fed ravenous sawmills. And man, in an effort to control this brush, began the practice of burning. Then on the burned-out hills and hollows, without the mat of leaves and vegetation to hold it bayed, rains fell and have fallen since, and with each rain more gullies were washed out, and the topsoil and the rocks were carried into the Black River and its tributaries. Then the gradual filling in of the stream began. The great gravel bars were formed, and the fish supply began to diminish. And there was another result. With the timber gone, with fire scourging the water-holding mat of leaves and rubble that once floored the forest, the rainfall charged down from the hillsides into the narrow valleys and piled up. Floods. Fertile farmlands along the river bottoms were in constant danger of inundation. Even towns were not safe from the threat. Poplar Bluff, largest city of the watershed with 12,000 people, came to expect at least one flood a year, with a turbid flow scouring the town's lowland areas and disrupting the lives of citizens and their commerce. In May 1940, the Department of Army's Corps of Engineers began the construction of a gigantic earthen structure on the Black River, naming it Clearwater Dam. The primary objective of the engineers was to reduce these devastating floods on the Black, with a further hope for secondary control of the White River. War interrupted this work, which was suspended in August 1942. But construction began again in May 1946, and the main job was completed in the fall of 1948. Clearwater was built to handle a tremendous fluctuation of water, with the idea of thus achieving some measure of control of the floodwaters. Clearwater Dam is located approximately 5 miles southwest of Piedmont, just about the Wayne-Reynolds County line. It has created a lake with a shoreline of approximately 1,650 acres of water surface, but at full flood stage, a surface area of 10,350 acres will be covered, more than 6 times the normal situation. Plans have been made by the Corps of Engineers, the Missouri Conservation Commission, and other agencies to manage this lake and its adjacent area for maximum benefits as a fish and wildlife region. Fish have been placed in the lake proper, and camping sites are planned for development within the basin. A fish study has been made of the lake under Dr. Robert Campbell of the University of Missouri, and further research goes on each summer. But that is something else. This has been a story about a beautiful stream, a river that has not deserved the fate thrust upon it by man and his unwise uses of the land. And even yet, let the burning cease, reforest the hills and hollows, let man use discretion in his search for ease in the outdoors. The upper reaches may once again become as productive in nature's pattern as the Black once was.